Hi, my name is Karen Smith, and this is my final presentation on eating disorders and body issues. And this presentation is basically going to cover this topic and hopefully give you a little awareness. So basically, eating disorders describe illnesses that are characterized by irregular eating habits and severe distress or concern about weight or body image. In our text, they're referred to as abnormal or disordered eating. And of course, in our politically correct society, um, a lot of that has to be semantics and what you want to call it. But in either case, there are severe illnesses that definitely need treatment. The most common forms of eating disorders are anorexia nervosa, which is self-starvation, a distorted body image, and abnormally low body weight. Bulimia nervosa, which is consumption of a large amount of food at one time, binge eating, followed by purging behaviors, which is self-induced vomiting, excess exercise, or using laxatives. And then what's called binge eating disorder, which is a recurrent episode of binge eating in the absence of purging behavior. Eating disturbances may include inadequate or excessive food intake, which can ultimately damage an individual's well-being. And these disorders do affect males and females, although there are more documented cases of females with eating disorders. One thing we can look at is the ideal body, because it has changed quite a bit over the course of history. In the 1900s, actress Lillian Russell was considered a beauty, and she was about 200 pounds. The flapper look came around in the 1920s. The Marilyn Monroe, the curvy figure, became very popular in the 50s. In this Twiggy in the 1960s was probably the first kind of supermodel like what we see now, because she was less than 100 pounds. Later, that kind of look came to be known as heroin chic because it was assumed there was an excess intake of drugs to have a body that looked that emaciated. Jane Fonda kind of brought back a sort of a healthy looking body with their 80s. Her look in the 80s, she had best-selling workout videos and books. And the fashion ideal today in terms of sports medicine is thin but well-muscled. Unfortunately, within ideal bodies for girls, there's still too much pressure to be abnormally thin. During the Renaissance period, obese women were considered beautiful because their girth suggested wealth and affluence. So it's interesting how the ideal body has changed over time. And the number of factors contribute to eating disorders. They are very complex disorders, and they're influenced by all of these different factors. Though the exact cause of eating disorders is unknown, it is generally believed to be a combination of biological, psychological, and/or environmental or sociocultural factors that contribute to the development of these illnesses. And all of these, again, are various factors. Some may have more influence than others. In this day and age, sociocultural has probably grown even more in influence due to the natures of bullying and online harassment. And so it's interesting how these have played out over the years, and where sociocultural may not have been as much of a factor back in, say, the 50s or 60s with the Twiggy culture, it's definitely more of an issue now. Some of the signs and symptoms, a woman or a man who is suffering from an eating disorder will reveal symptoms, and some of them are chronic dieting, which is people who continue to diet despite the fact that they're underweight. Constant weight fluctuations can be an indication, if not of some natural illness, of somebody who is suffering from an eating disorder. An obsession with calories and fat content in food. Ritualistic eating patterns are a sign of a disorder, cutting food into tiny pieces. Refusing to eat with people, always eating alone, and hiding food. Depression or lethargy is actually a symptom of eating disorder, and on its own, it could be also, that could be several illnesses, but taken with some of these other things, it should be a trigger, a signal to someone that this person may need help because they have an eating disorder. Avoidance, social functions, family, friends, becoming isolated and withdrawn is another sign and symptom. And then people who switch constantly between periods of where they overeat or where they fast. Because of the severity and the complexity of these conditions, a comprehensive and professional treatment team specializing in eating disorders is fundamental to establish healing and recovery. Not unlike all the other 12-step programs, the first step is people have to know and admit that they have a problem. But treatment for an eating disorder is usually comprised of one or more of these tactics: medical care and monitoring, Health issues are the highest concern as a consequence of eating disorders and have to be addressed immediately. Nutrition nutrition has to be part of the healing process, including a weight stabilization program and restoration, as well as guidance for normal eating and probably the execution of meal plans. Therapy, different forms of therapy, whether it's counseling with family, friends, group therapy, in treatment or outpatient, those kind of things may be necessary in extreme cases. And medications. There are some medications that may be necessary to help resolve mood and anxiety symptoms that contribute to the eating disorder. There are some symptoms that people can have that exacerbate. They don't necessarily cause the eating disorder, but they exacerbate the issue. And so those things may need to be treated as a separate health issues. And so getting people to admit they have a problem is like always, any recovery program is the first and most vital step. Eating disorders kill. They kill people. Anorexia nervosa alone is the highest fatality rate of any psychiatric disorder. In the early 1980s, Karen Carpenter, who was a famous musician back then, died from heart failure caused by her anorexia. And that was the first real celebrity case that brought attention to this issue, but this continues to be a problem today. Surprisingly, not as well known of a fact is that there is a great risk to the LGBT community. According to the National Eating Disorders Association, people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender are at a higher risk of developing eating disorders. This is attributed to the fact that gay and bisexual men who are single tend to feel more pressure to be thin and to resort to restrictive eating disorders. Women in the lesbian and bisexual communities still struggle with eating disorders and are more likely than their heterosexual counterparts to develop and suffer from mood disorders, again, which can exacerbate eating disorders. One of the most interesting facts is that right now, about 5% of Americans define themselves as fully vegetarian. However, among those with eating disorders, vegetarianism is very prevalent. In other words, people who have begun getting treatment, getting help, admitted they have a diseating order, a large number of them, I don't know the exact percentage, but more than 50% of them are already vegetarianism. So not saying vegetarianism causes it, but people with eating disorders often go that route first as a way to try to satiate their desires to be thin or whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. There are some urgent concerns with eating disorders. Malnourishment is a concern, an unstable heartbeat, and over the course of time, osteoporosis or bone loss is an urgent concern. These are all things that can cause immediate medical crisis for people who have eating disorders. And so if you know someone with an eating disorder, it's really important that you help them. With the amount of information, and especially the amount of misguided information about eating disorders that is out there right now, it is common for these very serious illnesses to be misunderstood, oversimplified, or greatly generalized. The truth of the matter is that eating disorders are complex diseases caused by a multitude of factors. Men or women who struggle with an eating disorder have a serious mental illness with potentially life-threatening consequences. Understanding the implications of eating disorders can help increase awareness and lead to people getting help. If you or someone you know exhibits signs or symptoms of an eating disorder, please don't wait. Get them help today. Thank you for participating and watching this presentation.